So here, going through the process of laying out the carving on paper, just because it's so much more visible than when I strike it in the wood with a marking gauge or an awl or a compass. So we'll do one on paper, but I'll use the tools to determine the shapes. The layout I strike by making a bottom and a top margin, and then striking a horizontal center line between them. The spacing between the units on this example is 3.5 inches. So I'll just set that compass to 3.5 and walk those off one by one. And I think there is 1, 2, 3 to the center. So 1, 2, this is the center, 2, 1, and 1 more for my other margin. And from those lines, I can go ahead and carry those up just like that. Little wheel in one of those. Now, the whole business about the strapwork pattern is there is a vocabulary that you fill this in with, and it can vary from one example to the next. This one is going to have a full circle in the middle and a half circle at each end, and I'll strike those first. Try to do it left-handed. That's one end, this is the other, and then same circle in the middle, and now a circle inside those. And I'm taking the dimensions of this one right off one of the examples on the drawings, but I will show you how to make this up as you go along as well in a different one. But for now, we'll just copy that one. And the next step I want to establish are those U-shaped brackets. And I use one layout line for those. It's 1 1/8 from the margin. So that line I strike, I don't run it all the way across. Oh, and look at what it does. It's the same plane as the height of those circles. From there I use a 3/8 inch chisel to begin to define these brackets. And so I'll just do it as if I were carving it. I lay the chisel and I eyeball it centered on that line. And in wood, I strike that chisel here, I trace it like that. And just make a little mark as to where that falls. And do that for all of these. So from here, when we get into the wood, I'll show you how to hold the tool, where to hold it and such. Now, I'm going to do the same thing, hold the chisel and on paper, trace it, on wood, strike it. Just like that. To make what I call this U-shaped piece right there. Now you're wondering why I don't lay all this out with the square and the awl, or in this case the square and the pencil. It's faster to just do it with the tools, because when I'm carving this, I'm striking it with the gouge, with the chisel right now, so cutting it as I go. Sort of the layout and the carving become the same thing. But you can carry them up to the same location that way if you want to. I tend to just do it again with the chisel. Certainly on the wood. On paper, it's probably easier to do it like this. And what this gets me is the beginning of the layout for these arches that run between these circular elements. So the next thing is a horizontal cut right here, left and right, 3/8 of an inch. And I use this 3/8 inch chisel on almost every scale, whether it's bigger or smaller than this. I still use this chisel for this spacing. You could maybe adjust it if you wanted to, but I usually don't. So what I'm after now is a shape like that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. And then from those, I want to know where is the midpoint between these two. And these are 3.5 inches, I think. So 1 3/4 inches. And all I really need, well, I'll strike a whole center line. Now I'm going to switch, I'm going to start getting out the gouges, and this work takes a lot of tools. Not that one, this one. Now I use this gouge and I connect the end of this horizontal line with that bottom margin, like that, and like that. And do that going left and right off each one of these U-shaped patterns. Like that. And I repeat the same business up above. So why don't I fill that in, and then we'll pick it up from there. Just harder to see when I'm holding the tool up there. So you can see it's slower to draw it than to carve it. To carve it, I just hit it. Here I have to run this line with a pencil. Now back to that gouge, and so you see these don't meet at the center. Sometimes they would. The spacing will vary. Some of the determining factors are the height of this line and the distance between the left and the right vertical dividing lines. So you bring these two closer and lower that, and this gets steeper. And likewise, do it the other way, and you get something different again. And we'll see variations on that strapwork theme one way or another. For right now, I'm laying off the ones that come up to the circles. We'll deal with them in a minute. Now, there's lots of ways to proceed. I'll sometimes go in this direction or that direction. What I tend to do is strike these lines. So one here is the 3/8 chisel again, and one there. Ends right there, ends right here. So the horizontal one is in line with this, and the vertical one you're looking at this spacing. You don't want that to get too narrow. Now there's a horizontal one that's not the full width of the 3/8 inch chisel. Right there. And when you're striking these, if you end up tilting your chisel, you can re-strike it. So let's say I tilted that out that way. Well, it's simple enough to just bring it in, get it that way. If you tilt in, then you've got a little bit more of a problem. But you could still then just trim it a little narrower, straighten it out. And this spacing, as I said, I'm catching that line, but otherwise it's by eye. And expect there to be some variety in your result. So that's the bottom set, and I'll reset the cameras and try to get some detail on the next part. All this is just the setup for what happens inside all these spaces. It took me a long time to learn to carve these patterns. They're very involved, and I had to learn what was important and what wasn't. So now, using that same large gouge, I'll do the inside of these arches. And there, what I'm looking at is the width of this piece right here. I want that to be consistent. Like that. I don't measure that spacing, I do that by eye. And you get a feel for it. It's one like that last one, that might be a little too heavy, and I could strike one more time inside there. So there's a remedy for too heavy, there isn't one for too light, too narrow. But you can see the pattern beginning to take shape. Now I'll concentrate on what happens along these vertical lines we've created to connect this north and south business. And the first thing I usually do, take a very small, very narrow gouge. This one is 5/16 of an inch wide, and it makes a circle that same diameter. And lining it up on that sort of crosshairs where those vertical and horizontal center lines meet, I just trace a small circle, or strike a small circle in the wood, like that. It's easy enough to do this with the gouge. It's a tight circle for my compass or my dividers. And when you're carving it, you just can pop it right out with the gouge, like that. Like that. Now there's going to be vertical lines coming, connecting these. I'll get out in the box front or whatever I might be carving. I'll do this with a wider chisel. I'd go get something maybe half an inch. The lines don't come all the way. They stop like that. Let me just do them while I have these tools here. So they're sort of the width of that circle I made. Well, a little heavier maybe. Remember, that circle's 5/16. The other stuff is all about 3/8. But they're close, like that. Now, using a very narrow and fairly shallow gouge, I'm just going to make a bit of a circumference around here to sort of run concentric to that piece right there. And it will then connect to horizontal lines. Whoops. So if I was striking that in the oak or any of the wood, that one would be, it couldn't fix it. So that's a little too high. It should be down about here. But it'll be fine. You can hide a lot of stuff in a busy pattern like this. Now, I'll put that center line between this one as well. That was 1 3/4 inches. Now, where I have the horizontal and these vertical center lines, I'm going to take this narrow gouge. It's just over 1/2 inch, it might be 9/16. I'll figure out its curve and width and put it up on the screen. And you just connect the dots with the horizontal and vertical lines and make that diamond shape there. Like that. Now, back to that really well, which gouge do I use here? Let's find out. Alright, it is the same gouge that did that circle. So what I'm going to do is make this, the top of this horizontal center line, come over towards that inverted diamond there, but not hit it. And then we'll connect this gouge to that horizontal line and bring this gouge almost around to itself. It'll just stop short of touching that line. So I usually do that by just striking the gouge first and doing the horizontal line after. Eyeballing its placement off of the horizontal line and the curved diamond shape. That one maybe got a little droopy. It's hard to do them with the pencil. So these only happen in this space. They're not going to happen in here. Alright, now this is coming up into a fleur-de-lis up above us here. And for that, I should have kept the drawing out. So now a more rounded gouge begins to define the leaves that come from the left and the right, just like this, and like that, and of course you do it at the bottom too, but let me just get the pattern drawn so you can see what it is. You can finish that leaf with the same curved gouge, but I switched to something a little flatter. And this doesn't come all the way to the center line and drops down a bit. So the second part of this leaf sort of flattens out a bit. like that as it pitches down toward that center line. Then there's 3 other leaves here. One of them tips out like that, and it's just 2 strikes of that gouge. This does not hit that center line. And then the next one goes up toward the top. The central one like that. And you try to get them nice and balanced. That didn't quite connect. So here it is again. This one pitches outward a little bit. Left and right. Redo that. And then the center one, of course, hits the top of the center line under the arch like that. So now we'll do that down below. So at this point you're thinking upside down. And you can do it assembly line fashion, you know, make that hip turn around, make this one then finish that leaf like that, and the angled one that comes back that way. So on. So there is that part. Now this gouge, that's too small. Let's finish off this arch here. See if same gouge that did it will do it. That's a little too much curve, so sometimes what I do is pitch that tool way over like that, and that sort of flattens out that curve a little bit, at least in my imagination, like that. So instead of holding it vertically, I'd pitch it into there. And so this is a very simple maneuver. Now you continue those lines and you can pick them up. They're going to come over here to the middle. Not going to make it all the way. But a good bit of the way. A simple thing is what goes inside there, and And for that I use this 3/4 inch wide gouge, and I don't bring it all the way to the center. I strike left and right, staying off that center line first. Sharpening my pencil as I go. So why am I not hitting the middle? Because I take a smaller version of the same sort of tool, narrower, similar curve, and do an inverted tip. So you get this sort of reverse curve right at the tip of this shape, like that. It's an extremely small detail that I really like. I see some that are just the single gouge and they round up, much like this cut here, to fill that space. But the ones I like best are the ones that have that little flourish at the end. Like that. So there's sections that come off the circles. Well, there's going to be a narrow bit something like that, but then a wider one that comes from the circle and you do this with a chisel like that. So what is that spacing? It's about the same, about the 3/8 of an inch. You can vary this. So that runs vertically and horizontally on all three of these round pieces. And it also connects the top and bottom margin like that. And there is a piece that runs behind that, very narrow. And it will connect to the piece that's going to come from here. That's what I'll draw next. So this is going to run like that same gouge. That distance I want to sort of get equal. I did that just an inch from that center line. Now this is going to curl up here, pick it up above that horizontal band. Different gouge now, more curve, and then similar curve but a little smaller, and it come right around like that. Then connect the dots, connecting this and that. Like that. Well, I might have to stop with that machine running. I don't know what they're doing. Because I'm not making enough noise to drown that out. There. Now, 3/8 of an inch seems to be the magic number lately. I'm going to create this on the side here. And I just eyeballed that because now I want to see what I have room for in here. Often it's a leaf that comes from here, and there's plenty of room in this case, so that's what I'm going to do. I'll use my big gouge, and this leaf will come out of that line and just bend up like that, and then curve around this way to fall back under there. See it over here. And you can fudge this way and that. It's kind of fat, but that's all right. And then repeat the same business up there. So this very narrow band, this all gets cut out. That, and then right here you just put a little bevel, so that looks like it's threaded underneath here. Like that. Well, from here on out, the rest of it is just details, which are better shown in the wooden panel than on paper, and they'll show up better. So here all I've done is begun to highlight the solid in the background. Whoops. A little wiggle to my line there. And so you can see here's what gets cut out. And all the rest remains as solid to get decorated one way or another. These aren't left blank, heaven forbid. So that's an introduction to the layout, and from this point on There'll be variations on strap work, playing with, as I said, that spacing, different infill here instead of the fleur-de-lis. Likewise, take this leaf out and put something different in there. We'll look at what goes in these circles. Can be any number of things. But that gets you the bare bones of how to establish that the pattern that is the strap work. The art history term is just referring to these bands that are interconnected all across the pattern. I've seen some things that suggest it stems from ironwork to begin with. I'm not sure that's true, but I'm not sure it isn't either. All I know is where you find it in English and New England carvings and how to do it. So next stop is a piece of wood.